Right, are you ready to hear all about your feature act for tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. She is a Marxist, trade unionist, socialist, feminist, neurodivergent and bi, author, poet, speaker and tutor who has multiple books published. She was part of the raging poetry movement in the 1980s, doing over 100 gigs before disappearing from the scene and making her return in 2014, describing herself as an angry, middle-aged woman poet. She runs training and gives presentations to trade unionists about autism and neurodiversity in the workplace. Her most recent poetry book, Amplify, is available from her publisher, and I'm going to let her tell you all about that, so please make her feel so welcome here. It is Janine Boo!
Cool, that was quite a build-up. I'm going to have to be good now, aren't I? Okay. Alright, I think I'll start with a list poem. Is anyone fans of a list poem?
Yeah.
List poems are great, they're just a list of things. That's all. All you got to do is kind of make them rhyme a little bit. And so what is this a list of? You know there's certain things that when rich or posh people do it, it's considered really, really cool. But when working class people do it, it's considered really naff and chavvy, yeah? Okay, so this is a list poem. Which includes an awful lot of those things, and it's called Classy if you're posh, trashy if you're not. Enormous TVs, arriving late, living off handouts from the state, owning a gun, dealing drugs, plastic surgery, demonstrative hugs, messing up at school, living in a squat, dropping out of uni, lounging on a yacht, talking loudly in public, not paying tax, double-barrelled surnames, hanging out in packs, big birthday bashes, parties with a theme, eating candy floss, cupcakes or ice cream, eating with your fingers, eating off a tray, being in debt, letting other people pay. When someone says they're skint, telling them you're skinter, having a tan, especially in winter. Jetting off on holiday to sun-drenched places, having parents and siblings of different races, piercings, dyed hair, nails, tattoos, drinking stronger than average booze. Going to rehab to cure your addictions, antidepressants and similar prescriptions. Casual violence of various sorts. Wearing sports gear when not playing sports. Or clothes that you bought at a second-hand store, designer clothing or any clothes at all. Making bad puns and thinking that you're witty, naming your baby after a city. Or a country. Or a car. Or a gemstone. Or a wine. Driving too fast and incurring a fine. Wars over territory, encroachments and land grabs. Several dogs, big dogs, little dogs in handbags. Staffies, pit bulls, Dobermans, Alsatians. Getting it on with your friends and relations. Distant fathers, inadequate mothers, having babies with various others. Living in a caravan, living like a libertine. Age gap relationships. Riding in a limousine. Telling your life story. Pouring out your heart. Highly emotional, personal art. Wallowing in misery. Drinking Jeroboams. But most of all, writing poems. Lovely. Okay, so, you know there's certain phrases that enter the kind of discourse that just really grind your gears, yeah? One of those for me is school refuser. I hate it because it puts all the onus on the kid. And so that inspired me to write this poem, which is called Who's the Refuser? Rebecca is a school refuser. The lessons confuse her, misknows her sister is a substance abuser, but it doesn't excuse her. She's labelled a shirker, assigned to an overworked social worker, a conflict diffuser, but Becky's still a school refuser. Mason is a lesson bailer, afraid of failure, he's looking paler and feeling frailer, attention derailer, he's flawed by distractions, can't make head nor tail of fractions, would rather go and find some action. Danny is a school refuser, a regular recuser. He's a bit of a loser. His dad's down the boozer. He's a bit of a bruiser. He says that it's better to be a fighter than a reader and writer. It'll get you further. It's worth more than a piece of paper, a C-grade scraper. It'll get him a job with a flash four-wheeler with a bloke he knows who's a grower and dealer. Sanjay is a school absconder. In class his mind would only wander, absence made his heart no fonder. He's an oversleeper, a poor timekeeper. His troubles run deeper than getting there for registration. He doesn't care for regulation. Chloe is a school refuser, a solitude chooser, a dad's an abuser, the system pursues her, the letters accuse her of truancy. No room for ambiguity, of skiving, depriving herself of an education, an entry-level qualification. Kids like her lack motivation. Yashvi is a school avoider. The noise annoyed her, the constant pressure near destroyed her, the pep talks never really buoyed her. She isn't sporting, finds it boring, exhausting. She cares for her parents and her elderly neighbour, uses up her emotional labour. Or maybe school is a child alienator, a confidence deflator, a forced conformer, anxiety provoker, anger stoker, cheerless stressor, peerless pressure, sense overwhelmer of taste and touch. It's just too much. Too disciplined, too regimented, thinly skinned, unprecedented, ambition foiler, prepare for toiler, streamer, grader, dissent, dissuader, starved and stunted, underfunded, character crusher, challenge, husher, spirit tamer, victim blamer. J'accuse the accuser, who's the refuser. So, stick with the subject of victim blaming for a moment. Shortly after the murder of Sarah Everard, a Tory, sorry you were warned about swear words, Tory, police and crime commissioner from somewhere in the northeast, it is my pleasure to have forgotten his name. What he said was, girls are just going to have to be more streetwise. He was forced out of office a couple of weeks later for saying that outrageous victim blaming thing to say. But I wrote a poem about it, and types of poetry. This is a, do you pronounce it triolet or triolet? Does anyone know? Well, this is like 4 triolets put together. And I thought I'd tell you that that's the form, because you will hear lines repeating themselves. So if I didn't tell you that, you'd probably just think I was too idle to write any new ones. But when you hear lines repeating themselves, that's because it's a requirement of the form. So this is called Be Streetwise. Be streetwise, girls, be streetwise, and you won't be false arrested. Look out for cuffs and meat knives. Be streetwise, girls, be streetwise, and memorise our treatises on what to do when pestered. Be streetwise, girls, be streetwise, and you won't be false arrested. Be aware, babes, awarer, and you won't be abducted. Don't trust the warrant bearer. Be aware, babes, awarer, and you won't go like Sarah and get your life corrupted. Be aware, babes, awarer, and you won't be abducted. Trust coppers, ladies, coppers, except for when you shouldn't. Like when they try to stop us. Trust coppers, ladies, coppers, but carry handcuff croppers, just in case you couldn't. Trust coppers, ladies, coppers, except for when you shouldn't. Be resistors all, resistors, and stop this victim blaming. Stand up for your sisters, be resistors all resistors, make conduct rules for misters, and stop this bloody shaming. Be resistors all resistors, and stop this victim blaming.
Yeah.
Okay. How am I doing for time? Yeah, not bad. 9 minutes so far. I'm going to do a long angry poem now.
Excellent.
Rather than those light-hearted little things I've done so far. Yeah, long angry poem, because some subjects deserve long angry poems, and this one is about the Grenfell Tower fire, which we're all allowed to be sad about, but I actually think we're entitled to be bloody angry about as well.
Yeah.
And I hope this poem explains why. Starts on a bit of Dickensian note. It's called A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and the worst of times. And the north of the borough gets the worst because of accidents of birth and because that's just the way it works. And yes, you guessed, the south gets the best. And the rest of the country only registered that Kensington had a proletariat when it shocked the commentariat by electing a Labour MP. 5 nights before, a fire on the 4th floor spread faster and further than it was supposed to do and grew from its room and consumed and entombed a tower full of humans. The rich and the powerful were unscorched, untorched, untouched, unburned, unburdened by losing pretty much everything. Until then, most folks thought that Kensington hosted mostly royals and billionaires. Not the toilers, but the heirs and your graces in palaces and similar places and with more money than you could possibly know what to do with. And skeletons. They knew that Kensington had skeletons. Skeletons in its museums, skeletons in its graveyards. And now the skeleton of what hundreds of people used to call home calls out the skeletons from the cluttered cupboards of the town hall, stubborn behind a firewall, a smoke screen, wiped clean by the dinosaurs of class rule, the bores and the fools who rush and stomp around, crushing lesser life forms into the ground. The rich and the powerful tightened our belts, but not their own. And a town full of people lost their life or their home. The rich don't live in tower blocks or social housing stocks. When they reside in tall buildings, they are called luxury developments, with opulent embellishments and panoramic views from the penthouse, not a cheap to rent house nor a worn and spent house. High flyers in high rises are high prices, high status in high places. They don't live in flats, they live in apartments. They live apart in fire-resistant compartments with state-of-the-art smoke alarms. And so they should. They're entitled to a fire escape, a safe space, a comfortable place to live, but so is everyone. And you can be sure that in every apartment on every floor there is a sprinkler system. And that if there is cladding, then it's gilded wrapping with all the trappings, not lined with aluminium, the bare minimum, second best failed the test, discounted price, discounted advice, discounted concerns about how fast it burns. Skin flint, say they're skint, cheap as chips and about as good for you, off the back of a lorry and onto the walls of the towers in the sky where the common people come to live and die. The rich and the powerful get their riches and their power from the labours of the powerful and their neighbours and people like them, like us. The first named dead had fled a war zone. He wanted to go home when the war was done. He was learning skills to help rebuild, but he was killed under enemy fire. People die like this when people live like this. Squashed into boxes in tower blocks, put upon the cheap, putting up people, keeping the least possible cost per life lost, per square metre or square feet of prime real estate, a drain on the rates. People die like this because people are made to live like this. By a system that gives only to the few, not a civilised living to the likes of you. A system like this run by spiffs for hire who wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. The rich and the powerful keep their riches and their power, while a tower full of humanity, of friendship and of family, of talent and potential of working class folk goes up in smoke. It's always the people in the cheap seats, in steerage, the lower orders, the servants' quarters, the backstairs, the disrepairs, the slum colony going through life in economy class, the wage slaves, not the masters, the underclasses. And what of those who run this system? The decision takers, the policy makers, the architects of TMOs and ALMOs and scrapping, rent capping, a right to buy and buy to let, and let's get by on whatever we can get, a bed, a roof above our head, a home not fit for habitation, voted down the legislation, closed the fire station. Compassion fakers, quick to forsake us in Kensington or Westminster, hold the line then resign, anything to avoid responsibility, anything to pass the blame, heads must roll, heads must hang in shame. The rich and the powerful give the victims the body swerve. They've got a nerve, while the townful get donations from neighbours and from strangers that fill the community centre shelves, given by people a little less unfortunate than themselves. The rich and the powerful close the doors in the faces of you and yours to talk about the townful and sanitise the cause of death and destitution on 24 floors. Okay, a couple more from me. Shall I plug the book now or after this? No, I'll plug it after. We'll do a history lesson first. Who's heard of the Stonewall Riots?
Yeah.
Okay, so June 1969, New York's finest, the police, raided the Stonewall Inn, which is a gay bar on Christopher Street in New York City. And if that was all that happened, we wouldn't remember it, because that used to happen all the time. And usually people would just go home or they get nicked. Do it all again a couple of days later. But that night was different, because that night the clientele fought back and they rioted for 3 nights on the trot, and in doing so they superseded the previously existing polite, apologetic, homosexual tolerance lobby with a new, assertive, self-organised, militant gay liberation movement, which evolved into today's LGBT+ movement. And Pride in this country began as an event to mark the anniversary of the Stonewall Riots, which is why it is usually the big one in London at the end of June. So the key fact here is that Pride has its roots in a riot. Okay? Not that you would know that by going on the corporate virtue signalling pinkwashing fest, which is most Pride events these days. So, well, most official ones anyway. A lot of the local grassroots was a lot better. So I thought I'd write a poem to remind people. It's called Stonewall Was a Riot. It wasn't the Stonewall focus group or the Stonewall business case. It wasn't the Stonewall let's present our most respectable face. Long years of asking nicely had not got us anywhere. Our rulers didn't listen when we whispered, it's not fair. So when rewriters tried to say we won by being quiet, remind them of our history, that Stonewall was a riot. It wasn't the Christopher Street parade or a carnival with floats. No candidates turned up and smiled to try to win our votes. It wasn't the Stonewall letter or the Stonewall resolution. It fought all night to light the dawn of the gay rights revolution. When glossies feed you tales that serve a bland and spiceless diet, remind them of our history, that Stonewall was a riot. Starbucks did not sponsor it. Nor Barclays Bank, nor Nike. It was not led by lobbyists, but drag queens, fads and dykes. The advertisers did not book a rainbow centre spread, and coppers did not dance with queers, but beat them till they bled. When corporations claim our cause, then comrades do not buy it. Remind them of our history, that Stonewall was a riot. Now every tactic, loud and quiet, is welcome on our stall. But if it hadn't been for the Stonewall riot, we'd have no pride at all. Now I'll plug the book. Because I've got some competition, obviously. Loads of books on sale tonight. I didn't notice there's loads of books on sale. Not really a competition. Buy them all. So yeah, this is called Amplify. It's my probably 7th book, I think. And best, I like to think. Came out in June. Recommended by quite a lot of impressive people on the back there. They're going, who? Henry Normal.
Ooh.
Joelle Taylor.
Ooh.
Mel Mullings from the RMT. Phil Jupiters. There you go. Rick Dove, Kate Fox. Ooh. That's mightily impressive. Anyway, yeah, it's got about 100 poems in, including most of the ones I've done today and lots of other ones as well. It's £10, and because for a socialist I make a very good capitalist, I do take cards as well as cash. So the book is themed on, it's called Amplify. It's themed on loudening the voices of people, communities and struggles that usually go unheard or not heard enough from. So I shall end on the title track. So this is called Amplify. Amplify the voices that rarely get a hearing. Power up the megaphone, drown out the jeering. Amplify and magnify the voices that are hampered by patronising platitudes and calcifying attitudes. Amplify the organisers building solidarity, alternatives to narratives of pity and of charity. Amplify those battling in fights for liberation, for self-determination, who won't settle for a homegrown tyrant for their nation, who want to rise up with their class and not above their station. Oppositionists in countries where it's dangerous to oppose, those who go to places where the camera rarely goes. The minorities within minorities, on the margins of the margins, despised by the authorities, nobody's priorities, whose voice deserves enlarging. The outsiders, the outriders, the swim against the tiders, who don't do what they're expected to, provide them with a platform that others have neglected to. Amplify the women who refuse to be veiled. Amplify the people whom the justice system failed, the unjustly jailed, the wrongly caged, the low and unwaged, the underage, the teenaged, the disengaged, the sages without stages, the rebels with a cause, the mocked and locked jaws. Amplify the activists whose activism freed us. Turn down the dial on the self-appointed leaders. Bring the rank and file to the top of the pile. The workers on the front line, not the bosses in head offices. The protesters, the speakers, the signers, the strikers, the spoken worders and open micers. Those backed into a corner who are frightened to speak. The courage grower, whistleblower, corruption shower, leak. The dissenter, the power denter, abuse preventer, representer. Give them talking time and columns. Turn up the volume. Share them, retweet them, don't let silence defeat them. Host them and heighten them, invite them and write about them. Defend them and publish them, don't let others rubbish them. Louden them, stop crowding them, be proud of them. Clarify and satisfy, give a platform, not an alibi. Multiply and magnify, ratify and amplify. Let this be your battle cry. Amplify. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keep it going for Janine. Wow. Me and Andy just looked at each other halfway through that and we just went blown away.
Yeah.
So powerful. Thank you for sharing that with us.